ahead and get started, and I'll just add more people as they enter the waiting room. But I'm going to let my co-chair, Mona Phillips, start us off.
Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to our webinar on exposing myths and redefining justice in the age of myths and disinformation. My name is Mona Phillips, and I'm the co-chair, along with Laura, of the Massachusetts South Coast chapter of Climate Reality, and we are sponsoring this webinar tonight. Our chapter has been exposing climate myths at every opportunity that presents itself. We do a lot of public tabling events where there's a great opportunity to interface with the public, as well as our bi-weekly newsletter where we publish articles on specific areas of disinformation. Tonight is the continuation of our work, and there were a number of people who've signed up, particularly to get some of this good information but couldn't attend tonight. So I'm sure that after hearing our speakers tonight, it'll be a lot of good information and eye-opening. Disinformation has been around since the beginning of human communication, but in more modern history, Winston Churchill observed, I love him, he always has great quotes, lies circulate 7 times around the world before truth gets its pants on. That's so Churchillian. But today, the internet lies circulate an order of magnitude beyond what Churchill even imagined. I know that tonight you'll get, the speakers will shed some light on this subject and give you tools to help sort fact from fiction. Our first speaker, Laura Gardner, I'll give you a little background on her impressive resume. Laura Gardner, a national board certified teacher in library media, is teacher librarian at Dartmouth Middle School and co-chair of Climate Reality Massachusetts South Coast. Laura became a trained climate reality leader in Minneapolis in 2019 and has since been advocating for an increase in renewable energy on the local level. She has presented locally, at the state level, and nationally on the climate crisis and topics related to school librarian function, including misinformation. Professionally, Laura was awarded the School Library Journal School Librarian of the Year co-finalist award in 2016, and she leads the 8th grade civics action project at her school. She's a huge, that's in capital letters, reader and a mother, and e-bikes to work every day, rain or shine. Our second speaker is Mariah Florentino. Mariah has 10 years of experience in visual and communications fields. She has worked for the New Bedford Whaling Museum, the College Art Association, and been a part of several curatorial projects. Her academic foundation includes a BA in art history with a focus in media theory and contemporary socio-political art, providing a rich understanding of visual culture and its impact on society. This is complemented by additional continuing education classes at the Rhode Island School of Design. She has practiced photography for 10 years and has owned her own photography business since 2022. She currently serves as the Development and Communications Coordinator at the YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts, where she leverages her skills to advance the organization's mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. I'm going to turn this over to the speakers, but a housekeeping thing. You will receive, this is being recorded. You will receive slides from this presentation, and we will have a Q&A section after each speaker's part in the presentation. So please put your questions in the chat, and with that, I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thank you for the introduction, Mona. All right, so let's see. So, misinformation and disinformation. I have been a librarian for 20 years, and this has only become a bigger part of my job as time has gone on, teaching students how to understand, how to evaluate information, and how to spot misinformation and disinformation. And I'm really excited to get the chance to talk about this with adults these days because I think it's really important that we're all aware, and I know a lot of us know just how much this is affecting our political landscape and everything else as well. So, just to have some definitions so we're all on the same page, misinformation is incorrect information that is shared unknowingly. Or perhaps even sometimes with good intent. And disinformation is incorrect information that is shared intentionally to deceive or mislead others. And sometimes what happens is someone will create disinformation and put it out there, and people will see it and they will believe it, and then they will spread it, but they don't know that it's incorrect information. So it often starts as disinformation and then it is spread as misinformation. And, ultimately, the intent doesn't matter very much once that incorrect information is out there, except to know that the person who's spreading it, whether or not it is misinformation or disinformation, can be helpful. But we have a lot of this in our media landscape these days. It's a really huge problem. This matters. Learning how to evaluate digital sources is more essential and more difficult than ever. I remember, I heard people talk about how, oh, we won't need librarians anymore once we have the internet because we'll be able to find everything we need online. And of course, we all know that's not true. We need to learn how to discern good information from bad more than ever because there's too much information. And so some of the reasons why this is so difficult. Number one, rise of social media and YouTube as main sources of news. Many adults in America, huge percentages according to the Pew research data, get their information first and foremost from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. And that's where they find out what's going on in the world. And social media, as we know, is a huge misinformation machine because that algorithm and biases are reinforced on these social media platforms. There's also, of course, the proliferation of AI and deepfakes, so we can't even believe what we see necessarily anymore. And I know that Mariah is going to get more into that. And markers of authenticity are much harder to find. Those of us who grew up with traditional media, I might be one of the last generations to have grown up, with traditional media where you got newspaper in the morning, newspaper at night. My parents watched the 5 o'clock news, the 5:30 news, and that was how we got all of our information. When I was a kid, the internet did not exist the way it did now. But those markers of authenticity are very easy to find in a print source. You have, the author, you have the name of the news media, you have a date. Whereas once these things make their way to social media, those authenticity markers often aren't there. Dates are removed, authors are removed, the photographer's name is removed, and images get recycled, as we'll talk about, and they get, used out of context and all those kinds of things. And then there's the fact that we have what's known as the community reading experience. That's comments, likes, shares, that impacts all of us as users, whether we're aware of it or not. We are much more likely to pause on something if it has been shared by someone that we trust on social media. If we see that friends of ours have liked something or commented on it, that's going to affect how we look at information. And given that the algorithm is always going to push things that are, sensational and, you know, often deeply disturbing, unfortunately, because that is the way the algorithm is set up. A lot of times, the most negative things out there are going to be reinforced, whether they're true or not. And of course, this means that a lot of the time we do not have a shared reality with our neighbors. And this is what has been so deeply disturbing for many of us in the last, 10 years or so, as our realities have diverged. One thing that I think it's helpful to think about is just how much media there is now. And um, it's really important to be aware of whether there's bias in the media that you consume or not. It is just fine to consume left leaning or right leaning, whatever the case may be, media, as long as you are aware that that bias exists. And I also think it's very important to occasionally dip into other media sources from the other side of the aisle so that you understand where the other side is coming from and what they are being presented with. So having a mix from your media diet. So this is one version of a media bias chart from the source All Sides, which is a really great resource that shows news articles and rates them as being left, center, right. And it's a good resource for my students. They use it to look at how bias shows up in headlines in particular. Another version of this bias chart is this one, a little more complex. So this is the ad fonts media bias chart, and it's updated frequently. And this bias chart, as you can see, has an x-axis and a y-axis. And on one axis, it has bias, and on the other one, it has reliability, everything from like just very fact-based up there at the top. So you've got everything from the AP, Reuters, Pew Research Center, to more analysis, more opinion based, and then fully fabricated, misleading information down toward the bottom. So these are pretty fascinating to look at, and I'm sure all of you see sources on here that you either use yourself or you hear people you know who use them. And again, it's just important to know, where are the resources that I'm trusting? Where are they coming from on this continuum? And is it fact? Strictly fact? Does it have some opinion base to it? Knowing the difference between fact and opinion, I know it sounds very, basic level, but it's very important that we all be on the same page about what that is. So media bias, um, and the whole screen algorithm explosion in our brains. What does that do? So there are a few different kinds of bias that it's important to be aware of. The first one is unconscious bias. This is the bias that's like baked into our culture, that, perhaps women over men, a certain race over another race, things like that. Things that we have absorbed through the culture, or maybe through family or school or media. And being aware of that type of unconscious bias is really important. A lot of times, police officers and teachers now have to do training where they become aware of their unconscious bias so that they can recognize it when they're on the job and make good decisions and not decisions based on their bias. Confirmation bias is a really important one that I hope a lot of us are already aware of. But confirmation bias is the desire to see things that match what we already believe. So when we're, scrolling through social media and we see a news story that makes us really angry, and it matches our belief system that we already have, and we don't fact check it because we're like, yeah, I believe that that's true because it matches my belief system I already have, and it actually isn't true. That's a time when we're possibly going to spread misinformation because of confirmation bias. Negativity bias is the belief that like there's lots of things wrong in the world, and so yes, this is probably true, so I'm going to believe this because it's negative. And ambiguity aversion is a really important one to understand when it comes to climate misinformation, because climate change is very complicated and the solutions are very complicated, and a lot of people don't like ambiguity and they don't like complex answers, and so we want things to be simpler. And so if we see information that does not fit our narrative, or we see information that does fit our narrative because we want it to be simpler, then we might be succumbing to ambiguity aversion and that bias. So specifically when we talk about climate mis and disinformation, there are several different ways this can look. One is just straight up climate denial. The climate crisis doesn't exist. It's not really happening. The scientists are wrong. And that is, of course, one form of climate misinformation that is out there. The ones that I think, we spend a lot of our time on in our newsletters and when we're tabling, our real focus is anything related to climate delayism. So that's redirecting responsibility and saying that individuals are responsible for the climate crisis and they need to fix the things that they're doing. Pushing false and non-transformative solutions rather than the solutions we already have that we know will work. Emphasizing the downsides perhaps of renewable energy, and then there's the doomerism. It's all over. So I thought maybe we dig into a couple of these just a little further. Oh, and I am not sure what happened to my slides, so hang on one sec. Oh my goodness, I made all these slides and I don't know where they went. Oh, I know exactly why. Hang on one sec. Sorry, I will edit this out of the video. I think I'm using the wrong, I think I'm using the one from our last presentation, Mariah, which is the same up until this point, so I apologize. And then it's orange right here. All right, the first thing I really want to emphasize when it comes to climate misinformation is it's really important to never, ever, ever repeat the lie. So this is something that comes from my librarian training. And so anytime that you see misinformation out there and you're trying to combat that misinformation, don't repeat the lie. Don't repeat the misinformation and the disinformation. Start with the truth. That is the most important thing. But let's look at what that kind of misinformation and disinformation looks like. So I'm sure some of you have heard about this. There's a woman who has been keeping her trash in a jar, and she did it for 2 years. And it's really admirable. And I think it's amazing that she's able to do that. This is heralded in the media as a great way to fight the waste crisis. We should all be reducing our waste as much as this incredible woman has. We should all be working really hard to carry that reusable bag everywhere we go and to never ever buy anything in plastic. And as an environmentalist, I do those things. But pushing all the responsibility onto the consumer and ignoring the real problem of corporations and government is incorrect. And so whenever this is spread as the solution, that is misinformation. So that is one form of climate misinformation that we see a lot of the time. You need to fix what you're doing as an individual. And what you do for your house is the most important thing that you can do, rather than advocating for legislation, rather than advocating for corporate responsibility and extended producer responsibility and those kinds of things. So like we have been having this really great conversation locally about waste, because they want to add incinerators to our region, and they want to have advanced recycling, which we know is not a real solution. And we get comments like this on articles where people say, like, it's a supply and demand issue. Consumers need to use things that are reusable, and then it would take up less space in the landfills. And every time I see that, I'm going to I'm going to fight back and say, no, it's producers who need to be held accountable. We need extended producer responsibility legislation, as well as international legislation to rein in plastic production. And this is a simple way that we can fight back against misinformation and disinformation, is anytime you see this argument that consumers are the problem, that they are responsible for the waste crisis, you can fight back and say, no, actually, this is the problem. And this is something that I've learned from my good friend, Mary Lou Nicholson, who has been fighting plastic pollution for over 12 years and doing beach cleanups. But when she does her beach cleanups, she does them with a purpose. She educates people about the real problem with the waste crisis and how we need a new bottle bill in Massachusetts and how we need extended producer legislation, extended producer responsibility legislation. So this is one way that we can fight back against this misinformation. False and non-transformative solutions. A lot of times what we're talking about when we talk about that is we're talking about greenwashing. Greenwashing is, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it, but it's misrepresenting that a product or a practice or a technology is environmentally friendly when in fact it's really not. And in fact, that business is not doing what they need to do to be part of the solution. So one local fight that we're involved in is the Stop Project, uh, help me out, Mona.
Stop private
Jet,
jet expansion.
yes, stop private jet expansion. So there is a airport in Plymouth that they are trying to expand the private jet section of the airport, and we are part of a coalition that is fighting back against that. The private jet lobby is saying, but we have sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs, and they're going to be ready very soon. And number one, it's a lie, and number two, any expansion of private jets will be hugely detrimental to emission levels. So that's something that, is misinformation that we're going to push back on every time we see it. Another thing that has happened recently is in 2004, a representative in the US Congress put forth a bill to accelerate a circular economy for plastics and recycling innovation. It sounds really nice. It sounds really environmentally friendly, and it's not. It is, again, advanced recycling, which is something that we're helping to fight here on the local level as well. This is a bill that has been endorsed by lobbying groups and plastic organizations, which is one of the ways that you know that it is not actually something that we should be supporting. So anytime we see those kinds of things, we're going to call them out for what they are. We're going to name it as greenwashing. We're going to name it as a false, non-transformative solution. We have real solutions. We want those real solutions to be the ones that we're focused on. Another project that we're a part of, and this gets at the misinformation where they emphasize the downsides. So Enbridge wants to extend pipelines here in the Northeast, and we're a part of the coalition to stop Project Maple. They say renewable energy won't get us where we need to be. We need to expand natural gas lines in order to be ready for the future, and that is not true. They're emphasizing the downsides of renewable energy. They're playing on people's fear that they won't have energy at critical times, when in fact, really what they want to do is they want to increase profits, they want to expand pipelines, and so we're calling it out for what it is. It's misinformation, it's disinformation, it's not going to get us where we need to be, and it's antithetical to our state goals when it comes to renewable energy. And then we have the doomers, of course. And, all of us who know enough about climate change know enough to feel some doom and gloom at times, but this is just not useful. Every single percentage of a degree matters, and we're going to fight for every single one. So when we see this, we have to fight back against it as well. So I have some specific tips for absolutely everyone. And these are the same exact tips that I teach my middle schoolers. And so I'm going to share with you a few of these, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mariah to talk about images and AI in particular. My number one tip is click restraint. Information moves incredibly fast, way too fast, but you don't have to. So when you see something that makes you angry or arises a big emotion in you, pay attention to that first. Because a lot of times, what that emotion is telling you is that this is information that is inflammatory. And a lot of times, the information that is inflammatory is not 100% true. Sometimes it is. There's a lot of information out there right now that makes me get pretty inflamed, and it is unfortunately true. So, order of results when you search does not equal trustworthiness. That's important to talk about. Always pause and take your time when you're looking through results. I remind my students all the time to scan the full page to find the best results, go to the second page to find more results, and remember that your results are only as good as your search terms. So if you are not getting good results, it may be that your search terms were not the best search terms and you should try again. Expert searchers search multiple times. They'll try one search, see what they get, look at the results, check to see whether they know about those organizations or not, and then they'll search again and again and again. Many of my students just click on the very first link that comes up on Google. A lot of times those are still the ads. Now it's the AI results. I have librarian friends who have tried to figure out how to turn off those AI generated results from Google, and they have determined that it is not possible, which I am greatly distressed by because I want to be looking at my own results and making my own decisions without seeing those AI results immediately pop up. And particularly as a teacher, I get very concerned about my students seeing those AI results and stopping there, because it will give them a full list and it seems like it should be incredibly useful. So that's something that I'm pretty upset about. Number two tip, and probably the most important, is lateral reading. And that means just simply opening up another tab. So when you see something that surprises you or upsets you or arises some, makes you curious or you have questions about it, opening up another tab to Google the source or the author or to see if other sources agree, that's always a good idea. So for example, as a climate reality activist, I follow climate reality on Facebook, and I saw this great post that was fascinating, and I went on to read the whole article about how fossil fuel, plastic, and agrochemical companies were coordinating their social media on climate change. And it's just really fascinating to see how they were working together, and downplaying the climate crisis and spreading misinformation in a coordinated way. And as I was reading through the comments, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but sometimes the comments on these climate reality Facebook posts get pretty angry, and there's a lot of misinformation in the comments. There's a lot of people who will say things about how it's a lie and, a lot of climate denial just in general. And one of the comments linked to this article, saying that Patrick Moore, who they claimed was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, shared that it's not as bad as it looks. It's not actually happening. And so then I was like, I've never heard of Patrick Moore. So I went to the article that they linked to, which was a special to the Financial Post, and then I looked more into him, and here I am just lateral reading like crazy. So I've got the Financial Post article, which looks very legit. Then I've got Googling Financial Post, finding out that it's a very conservative leaning um, uh, news website that has misinformation when it comes to science. And then I'm Googling Patrick Moore, finding out that he's actually not a co-founder of Greenpeace, but they claim that all the time. He worked for Greenpeace early on, and since then has used that claim to then try and spread all of this misinformation. So at any rate, took me down a big rabbit hole that debunked everything that was in that article, and also, clued me into the fact that this is someone who is spreading a lot of misinformation when it comes to climate. So that was pretty fascinating. A couple of things that I know were on social media in the last few months that, you know, quick lateral reading helped debunk. So when Trump first went into office, people started saying some things about how the US flag and the .gov website, suddenly only had 9 stars. And that was all over Reddit. You can see that this screenshot is from Reddit. You know, it's just because it's such a teeny tiny flag. It wasn't anything nefarious. It was just the way it happened to look. Um, and so that was misinformation, because it's really important to remember misinformation isn't just from conservative media outlets. Misinformation happens with liberals as well. And then here's another one. This was debunked. This was shown as if this was a huge turnout of protesters in Wisconsin against Trump, but it's actually an NBA Finals watch party. So pictures taken out of context, slapped into different situations, but it's not actually what it's supposed to be. And the way that I find these things out a lot of the times isn't even just by lateral reading, but it's because of fact-checking organizations, which I highly recommend you check out, spend some time with, maybe check every day. So these are some of the ones that I've used over time. I'm going to show you my 3 favorite real quick. So Media Bias Fact Check is a really great website, and it does have ads, which is kind of annoying, but you can donate and then get it ad free. But it'll take all sorts of things from the last few days, and then it'll tell you whether it's a lie, whether it's true, things like that. So it'll fact check all of these, and then you can go way deeper into it. And for every single one of these websites, it is totally transparent. Where do they get their funding? How do they find out their information? Everything about them. So you can make sure that they actually are a fact-checking organization that you can trust. Probably my very favorite one is RumorGuard. RumorGuard, you can sign up for email alerts, and they're very student friendly. So I use this one a lot with my students. So this is an AI generated image. It's not real at all, but people might have thought it was real. And RumorGuard goes out and finds out the truth. As Mona said in the beginning, lies travel so fast, they get repeated. Unfortunately, a lot of times this kind of information that this is not true will not get seen by all the people who saw the lie and spread the lie. So that is one of the hardest things about debunking misinformation, is that we often don't find out the truth. Most people don't. Most people who've spread that lie and seen that lie. So that is really hard. And then PolitiFact is my other favorite. This one is just so fantastic. So it'll take statements that are made on social media, statements that are made in public events, and it will put them into this truthometer. And sometimes the lies are so bad that they are what's known as pants on fire. Sometimes they're, totally true, mostly true, partway true. It'll break it down completely. And again, this one, as well as RumorGuard, has total transparency, and so you can find out everything about where they get their information and their funding and all of that, and how they maintain their independence. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mariah for a bit.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Um, so like Laura said, it's really important to pause and kind of digest the information that we're taking in. It's hard to find exact statistics, but it's estimated that when people are scrolling through social media, they spend about less than 5 seconds on each still image. So we're encountering a lot of information very quickly and not spending enough time to really assess what it is that we're seeing. Um, there's something called the illusory truth effect, which is basically saying that hearing a statement repeated makes it sound more plausible to us. Um, so this means that we need to be aware of the messages that we're receiving, even on a subconscious level, such as when we're scrolling through social media and, again, not really digesting these images and what they mean and why they're being put out there. Um, and every single image has a message. And just for clarity, when I say image, I mean any kind of image that includes videos, paintings, digital media, um, images that your friends took sometimes, literally anything visual that you see. And while a lot of what I'm talking about does take place on social media or on the internet, we're going to go through how to kind of dissect an image and get to its meaning. And the tips that I'm going to give you for that are mostly applicable to every single image that you see, regardless of the context. Um, so some images have very complex, complicated messages. So on the far left, you can see The Last Judgment by Michelangelo. This image is packed with messaging. There's narratives about the Catholic Bible, and through a more detailed analysis, you can get information about the socio-political climate of like Renaissance Florence, and even some kind of biographical information about Michelangelo and his commissioners and all of that. So, very deeply packed image. And then you have more kind of simple, straightforward, direct images like the flyer for the YWCA to the next. It's pretty easy to determine that we're telling you what the organization does. There's some images to kind of show our work and who we are. Not not a whole lot to digest there that takes a lot of deep analysis. Um, when people think about images having messages, they often think about propaganda. Um, and the most basic definition of propaganda is a image or message that is meant to inspire you to believe or do a certain thing. Most of the time, this is, thought of in a sort of political context or often a negative context. I mean, we're all familiar with the Uncle Sam, I want you to join the US Army. But by going with that really, really simple definition, things like, telling us to wash our hands, eat our vegetables, brush our teeth, that is also technically propaganda. And it's not. Um, I think we can all agree that washing your hands, eating your vegetables, and brushing your teeth are good things to do. Um, so just clarifying that just because an image has a message doesn't necessarily mean that the message is good or bad. And then even the images that we see on social media of somebody, if you can go back one more, um, on social media that our friends took of their dinner or their dog. That is my dog in the middle. That also has a message. It's not a very complex one. It's just, this is my dog and I think she's cute and look at my dog. That's still a message. So again, just hammering in the point. Every single image has a message, whether it's complicated or simple. I can scoot on. Sorry. Thank you. Um, So the first kind of step in determining what a image is giving you a message, or what the message the image is trying to give to you, is to look at the denotative and connotative meanings. So denotative is what is literally shown or said, what the image is of. Connotative is the secondary or figurative message associated with what is shown. So a rose, for example. Denotatively, it's a flower, it's a rose. Connotatively, you might use that to kind of make you think of romance or love. And it's important to keep in mind that nothing exists in a vacuum, so context is very, very important because the connotative meanings will change based on that context. For example, violets for a long time have been associated with queer women. So if you have a painter who painted women hold or a portrait of a woman holding violets, chances are she's trying to communicate that that is a queer woman. However, if there is a painter who is painting a landscape and you see violets and you know that this painter is not queer, chances are they're just violets. Um, so something to keep in mind. Um, so the next question you ask is who made it? Because this helps determine the context that you want to analyze the image in. Like I said, a landscape painter who is not queer probably does not know that specific meaning. It would be inaccurate to analyze that according to that context because that's not their intention. So questions to ask, where are they from? Both geographically and culturally. Um, and what communities are they a part of? Are they a reliable source? Um, So when asking where are they from and what communities are they a part of, that helps you determine their visual culture. When asking if they're a reliable source, were they at the event that they took a photo of? Do they have experience or knowledge in the topic that they're making images about? Where does their information come from? The same way that you would want to fact check the reliability of the author of an article. What do they have to gain from sharing this? Um, is it just engagement? Is it they're trying to sway you to vote or support a specific thing or belief? Do they genuinely just want to share this information? And then a real big one is whether or not they are, in fact, a real person. Um, so on the next slide, and since this is getting shared out, I'm not going to go over every single thing on this because it's quite a lot. But there are some ways to kind of spot a bot. Um, and keep in mind that just like this says, just because it acts a certain way doesn't necessarily mean it's a bot. I mean, there's, indications like it only has one or two friends. Well, so does my aunt. So she's not a bot. She just doesn't really use Facebook. Um, but when you have a lot of things kind of adding up, then you can kind of make a determination. And sometimes it's as simple as clicking on the profile of the person who shared it, or whether that's somebody who, is continuing to disseminate it, or it's the person who originally posted it. And just kind of looking, does this look like a real person? And kind of using these things to kind of guide you in that. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is formal elements. So artists intentionally use formal elements, and by formal elements, I mean things like the light, composition, color, repetition, other things like that to invoke a thought or a feeling. Um, Artists definitely use these intentionally. A lot of people, when creating images, use it intentionally. Sometimes an image is just a snapshot, and these things are not meaningfully being used or intentionally being used, but it's still good to look at these things. On the left is a very famous image by Andreas Gursky called 99 Cent. And on the right is an image of a dollar or discount store. They're both of a discount store, but the one on the left clearly feels very different than the one on the right and is communicating something different. So, it's important to kind of look at those things because they really do make a difference. They can also kind of tip you off too if things are edited or generated. And we'll get into that a little bit more in just a little bit. You also want to be checking for fallacies. Again, same way that you would when you're reading. So there's the ones that I tend to see the most on social media and in images in general, or videos is cherry picking, emotional appeals, and appeals to authority. Um, so cherry picking, I mean, how many times have we seen videos of somebody going to a college and interviewing students and asking them very simple questions, and magically none of them know? Do we actually think that not a single student on this campus knows how many stars is on the American flag or, some basic thing like that? Or do you think they interviewed 50 people and then picked out the one or two who got the answer wrong? Things like that. Emotional appeals are huge, especially with images, because they are It is very easy to get emotional from images. And when you are emotional, you don't really have the same access to the kind of logic side of your brain. So you're not going to question as deeply. And a lot of the time, that's what the people sharing this want. And then, of course, there's appeals to authority. We've all seen videos on social media or images of, a person with a quote next to them or that sort of thing where they say, I'm a doctor and here's what's really happening in hospitals. There's nothing stopping me from going on the internet right now and saying that I'm a neuroscientist and this is how the brain actually works. Doesn't mean that it's true, but it sounds really good. So again, same way that you would want to with a journal article or a news article, you want to look at, who is this person actually? Do they have the authority to be making the claims that they say that they are, or that they say that they have? And keep in mind too, sorry, this is just an add-on to the last one, is that a lot of the time with emotional appeals, there's rage baiting. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it is something that happens very often where creators will intentionally do things that make people mad because it drives engagement and they have content that's monetized. I think we've all seen this on social media, and sometimes it's hard not to fall for it. But again, that goes back to what are they gaining from sharing this and from doing this? Um, so definitely want to talk about spotting AI. We all kind of know the obvious things by now, like the weird lines, curvy, disjointed, impossible architecture, extra fingers or other horrible body parts, jumbled and misshapen and inconsistent letters. We've all kind of gotten hip to those kinds of things. But there's other slightly more subtle things to keep aware of too, like inconsistent perspective, inconsistent lighting. With videos, a big thing is the facial expressions. Often the mouth will be moving, but they won't be blinking like a actual human being does, or the mouth will be moving, but the rest of the face doesn't emote. Um, so that's something to kind of look out for. I've heard it explained that a lot of the time with deep fakes, it's because they're putting a 2D image onto a 3D, um, or yeah, sorry, a 2D image onto a 3D object. So it doesn't quite line up right. A lot of times too, there's inconsistent or nonsensical areas of focus with depth of field. So, I don't know if you ever really look at photographs taken by photographers, um, the wider your aperture is, the narrower your depth of field. So you uh, won't necessarily have everything in focus. We've all seen like a close-up image of a flower and the background is all blurry. Well, if that flower is in focus and everything else is blurry, and then out of nowhere, a mountain way off in the distance is also in focus, it's probably AI because that just physically cannot happen. Um, Sometimes we also see things like the lack of technical limitations, like aberration or fringing. So that's kind of like when you see like the green or purple outlines around things. Specifically, it happens where there's like something dark against a light background or vice versa. I'll save you the nerdy technical explanation of it, but it is something that sometimes happens. Or sometimes you'll see images that don't have any noise or grain. Um, and it's important to keep in mind that not seeing those things doesn't necessarily mean that it's AI. As a photographer, I work very hard to compensate for those kinds of things and edit them in post because they're technical limitations and you want to overcome them. But if you see those things and something seems a little off, it might kind of give you an indication. And you can also edit those things in if you want to make your AI image seem convincing. Um, you also want to kind of like lateral reading, lateral looking. Are there other angles or photos of this? You know, if you see an image of something that supposedly happened in front of a lot of people or, you know, was a big national event or something, everybody has a phone in their pocket with a camera. And if you only see one image of it, it's highly unlikely that it's actually real because people would be taking pictures of it. More than anything, though, you can't use any one indicator as a definite yes, this is, or no, this isn't. There's multiple different AI models, and they're all good and bad at different things. So you can't have like a one size fits all. And more than anything, you need to be able to stop and pause and say, does this make sense? Would this person be acting this way? Would they be there? How could this image be taken? Um, so, and again, this doesn't just go for social media or the internet. Um, you know, there's nothing preventing me from printing an AI photo and hanging it up somewhere or just faking them. So it's just important to pause and think. And it's also important to keep in mind that AI is not the only way that images have been faked. Images have been faked since the invention of cameras. So you can move to the next one. Thank you. Um, so photo and video manipulation happen all the time. Like I said, they have always happened. There's misleading angles. There's staged images and images taken out of context. Um, and all of those things can be very convincing. We're going to get into them a little bit more with some examples. So editing and manipulation. On the top left is a picture of Abraham Lincoln. It was very famous. It's actually a composite image. It was a image of, I believe, Calhoun, and then they pasted Abraham Lincoln's face over it and made a composite. Um, and it was believed to be real for almost a century until some journalist was looking at it very closely and noticed that the mole on Lincoln's face was on the wrong side. So they took photos that were from different angles, essentially, and put them together. And obviously, Abraham Lincoln was not, the man who made this photo was not using AI. He was not using Photoshop. Another example is directly next to it. I've done wedding photography, I do family photography. I do this kind of thing all the time where I just edit somebody right out of a photo, or I can edit them right in. It's not particularly challenging, so anybody who is familiar with editing software can do it, um, you know, very easily and very effectively. And a lot of the time, when it's done by people, it will be more effective than AI because AI isn't going to look at the image and really see the things that give it away. But, you know, I'll go in and I'll blow it up to, you know, 500% and make sure that every single pixel is right because I clearly have too much time on my hands. Um, Images also get taken out of context a lot. So this is a absolutely perfect example that Laura actually shared with me of an image that was taken, and it was said that, you know, this was the aftermath of a climate protest, but it wasn't. I believe it was for some kind of fair or festival or something that happened. I don't even think it was in the same city. Um, but, you know, somebody just took this picture and they made up whatever caption they wanted about it. And then that was that until somebody again tracked it down. What's very helpful for finding the context of images is using reverse image search, and I'll share a resource with that at the end. Staged images, also really faked. this is a very famous image down at the bottom left. Um, and it really does seem like they're standing up at, or they're sitting down, but um, sitting down on a scaffold, way high up. But this was actually done in a studio. They were probably, I don't know, 3, 4 feet off the ground at most. But, it was convincing. And same thing. I mean, we've all seen movies and they spend a lot of money and a lot of time making things look convincing. And they look great. And of course, in the context of going to a movie theater or putting on Netflix, it's not real. But if, somebody took a still from Saving Private Ryan and put a black and white filter over it and said, oh, this was from my grandfather from World War II, it might not immediately ring that alarm bell, unless, of course, you'd seen that movie. Um, and then misleading angles are a big one too. So you can see in the image on the bottom center that it looks like a really packed street, looks very busy. But then directly next to it is how the image was actually set up, and they're standing really far apart. It's just that they played with perspective and angles to make it look a certain way. And it's also easy too to take an image of something and, you know, I don't know, I could have something right off camera and you would never know. So, something to just kind of keep in mind is that you only see what you see and you don't know what you're not seeing. So with this in mind, um, I believe on the other PowerPoint, I had better examples of real or fake. If you want to switch over to that, or we can just do like an abbreviated version of this. Sorry to make you switch back. Oh, yeah, you can see too that I included another example of misleading angles. There was images that were shared with kind of the caption of this is what the forest looked like in 2009, and then this is what it looked like in 2019, 10 years later, kind of sharing the information about like deforestation. But when you zoomed out, it was right next to each other. They just, again, kind of played with the cropping and the angle. So, so yeah, now that we've kind of played with, or I've given you some tips for spotting images that are faked one way or another, we're gonna play a real quick game of real or fake. So, you can put in the chat whether you think an image is real or fake. And I've got just a couple of examples to share with you. And we'll keep it quick. So, what do we think about this one? All right, so people are saying it's fake. Which is true. It is fake. It's an AI generated images. Um, so, and I see someone saying that social media, and I get you. But again, this could be on a news website. This could be in an actual newspaper. This could be printed out somewhere. I just want everyone to keep that in mind. Because our guard is on when we're in social media, but it seems like a lot of people let down their guard in other contexts, and we shouldn't. Um, So yeah, this is fake. You can see that the signs are kind of wonky. Um, the light posts look weird. There's impossible architecture. Um, yeah, the Eiffel Tower is directly in the middle of the street. So this one is kind of an easy one. Let's go to the next one. What about this one? Real or fake? So this one is fake, although a very convincing fake. Because if you look, you'll notice that there's reflections on the ice. They did a really good job, but this is a composite image. Um, and this is a really good example of stopping and pausing and wondering, does this make sense? Because canals in Venice have frozen. But when they freeze, it's much slushier. If you stop and think, well, how cold would it be and for how long for it to be frozen that evenly and that deeply? Like you can see that's deep ice. Um, again, the composite artist did a really good job with this one. And go to the next. All right, what about this one? Real or fake? All right, yeah, this one is real. Um, you guys are pretty good at this. Maybe you don't need me after all. But yeah, this one is real. Can't remember the name of this cloud, but I do know it is a real cloud. It does look surreal, but it is a real photo. And I think we got one more. So this one, real or fake? Yeah, this one is fake. Um, yeah, like someone pointed out, Cecil, the the biker is off. You can notice that he's just a little bit lighter than the rest of the image. So this is kind of what I mean by inconsistent lighting. The rest of the image is real. There was a bear running down the road that someone got a photo of. But then yeah, they just photoshopped the biker into it. And we can skip this one, go to the next slide. So this is one of my favorite videos of the internet. We'll play real or fake with this one too. What do we think? Real or fake? All right, yeah, this that was a fake video. They did do a very good job editing it, I think. You can see the side by side. And this was not AI generated. This was done by an actual person, which is probably why it was a little bit more on the like convincing side. Um, but again, just to show you that it is very easy uh, to edit images, to edit videos. And that again, a lot of the time it isn't AI, it is a person, and they're doing just as effective or more effective of a job faking images. Right, and then just some resources and further info. I mentioned reverse image search. My favorite is TinEye. They've been around forever. They do a really great job. And of course, when you're looking through the results, use Laura's tips. Keep in mind that the order they pop up in might not be, the order that they originally were posted in. But if you look far enough, you can usually find the original source. There's a great documentary on PBS that you can watch for free called Fake: Searching for Truth in the Age of Misinformation. If you're interested in learning more about analyzing images, I recommend reading Ways of Seeing by John Berger. It's one of the like first things really that they have you read in when you're taking art history courses, and it's fantastic. And you can read most of the essays for free at that website. The Disinformation Index has a whole lot of information about disinformation and kind of more resources for you there. Um, there's also a fun one from the New York Times, which is aimed mostly at students, but I think we could all use it because um, this kind of thing is a muscle. The more that we practice it, the better that we get at it. So they have a column where basically they show you an image, and with no context whatsoever, you have to try to assess what's going on in there. And then either the next week or the next day, I believe it's the next week, they tell you what is happening from it. And then there's some that are just for fun. This person does not exist.com shows you AI generated people. Um, and again, it's just kind of fun to see what AI can do and not do. There's the AI identification test. Again, same thing. It's just good to practice identifying it. And then this climate does not exist was a fun one that I found recently. Same kind of thing. It generates AI images based on Google Maps images to kind of get an idea of, I don't know, what New Bedford would look like if there were a flood, for example. Um, so again, just a kind of fun resource.
And I just wanted to add at the end here just some quick tips before we hit the Q&A part. Um, if someone you know is spreading misinformation, um, what do you do? So for one thing, pick your battles. Like, you aim to hopefully continue to have a relationship with this person. So pick what you're going to address and how you're going to address it. Be gentle and seek to understand. Definitely consider a DM or a private message rather than commenting directly on their post. And always be supportive and positive and assume best intentions. Assume it's misinformation and not disinformation, that they just don't know the truth, and maybe they didn't get good media literacy training when they were in school, and maybe their school didn't have a librarian like some places don't. Try to find points where you do agree and be empathetic, and don't be afraid to link to the nonpartisan fact checkers. But the most important thing that we can all do to address misinformation and disinformation is to have conversations about this more regularly. Tell someone you see tomorrow about this presentation and a couple of things you learned. This is what's known as pre-bunking, so that we don't have to do the debunking as much because people are already somewhat inoculated to the idea that misinformation and disinformation absolutely exists. It's out there, it's happening all the time. It's more prevalent because of social media and algorithms and the fact that the internet has just exploded the media landscape. I was listening to a story from the New York Times this morning about a town in California where they interviewed over 80 people in the town, and not a single person subscribed to any print newspapers whatsoever. Everyone got their news from social media and YouTube. And conspiracy theories were a huge problem. And this reporter was just trying to understand, because this was a town that went for Biden and then went for Trump significantly in the 2024 election. And he went thinking that was a story and came out of it realizing that the story was about misinformation, and it was about just how the media landscape has changed so much. So this is happening everywhere. It's a huge problem. And the only way that we're going to address it is if we have all sorts of people out there who know the truth and are talking about the fact that misinformation exists on a regular basis, and starting to, post things about from fact checking organizations. And you don't need to see misinformation from one of your friends to post one of these things. Like if you post something from PolitiFact or post something from RumorGuard, just on a more regular basis, sharing the fact that misinformation exists, and here's the truth about this conspiracy that went out, or this misinformation that's being spread around, that will help more and more people to understand just how much of it is out there. So want to thank everyone for coming. I'd love to answer any questions that people have for either myself or Mariah, or more in general.
I did see one
Laura,
in the chat. Oh, sorry.
uh, Laura, early on, Mary said that she talks with somebody who's quite intelligent, but she's surprised at how easily this individual kind of swallows disinformation. And I'm sure all of us have had that experience. And I'm just wondering if you had any additional words on that. You did make a point, a very good point of saying, we should, people are, some people are just not at all aware of how they're being manipulated. And that's a good place to start. But when you're trying to address somebody who sort of is gullible, it sounds like Mary is talking about this individual, what, you have any thoughts on how to address that?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to remember that this person, um, nobody wants to be told that they're wrong. Nobody wants to hear that they've been duped. Um, and so trying to come at it from a place of like, one time this happened to me and I believed this information, but it wasn't true. Because I think that has happened to everyone. I think all of us have had a situation where we saw something that we either wanted to be true or we believed, most likely because of confirmation bias. And so coming from a place of this happened to me once, do you think that's ever happened to you? And being able to bring it up to try to find a place where you can find commonality. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Mariah?
No, I mean, I think that's great. I think too, you can try to show them facts that refute it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Again, yeah, approach it with compassion, and you can try to redirect them, and hopefully they're open to that. But definitely understand the frustration with that.
Yeah.
One thing might also be, I think those are good points. There may be another thing that says you don't exactly hit that one head on, but maybe say something that kind of just says, well, maybe consider this, and just put it out there, just to put hopefully a little doubt in their mind as to the veracity of what they've just heard. But I don't know. It is difficult. I don't quite know how to do it myself, but um, I hope people are beginning to understand just how much garbage is on the internet, but I'm not really sure they are yet. But anyway, these were very, very good points. And I think the fact that there's so many resources available to us who are now very sensitive to this issue, it's there. We should avail ourselves of all of them. And also, I really do feel much more sort of sensitive to some of the image manipulation. I'm very media oriented and text oriented. I read a lot of articles, but I don't really think as much in terms of some of the visual propaganda. And so that's pretty important too. So I thank you for that.
Wendy, did you want to ask a question?
I wanted to kind of talk about, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for this presentation and this information. This is helpful. Um, I've kind of learned to hone in on my critical thinking skills throughout all of our campaigns and learn, about credibility and building our own credibility in the process and how important that is. I don't know if anybody else on this Zoom is affiliated or associated with or actually part of the group Citizens Against Eversource. It started down here on the South Coast. It's expanding throughout the Commonwealth, and I mean, I kind of stopped checking in, but the last I checked, they were at like 34,000 members in their group. And I bring this up because it's really concerning to me because I know that, we've got Project Maple that is, looming and threatening our area. And as the group, one of the members of the group that fought against Access Northeast for 5 years and won that, um, we've kind of been hyper vigilant all along ever since, even though we're fighting something different now. We keep our eyes and our ears open, waiting for Access Northeast to be revived in some other way, shape, or form. And so Project Maple might be, a smaller version of something that's going to lead into something bigger because that's what they do. They break things up into smaller things, so it's not as scary. That's called segmented projects. But I bring this specific situation up because um I joined that group to lend my support and to lend my voice and to lend my strength in numbers as part of the outrage against the rates. Yeah, I agree. The rates are not what they should be. It's unconscionable. It's not acceptable. Um, but it started there and it's gone a very different way and it's become highly politicized. I mean, they have, something at the, pinned that says, only respectful comments in this group and blah, 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 and treat everybody with kindness. And then they're literally like calling people who don't agree with them trolls and brainless. And I'm just like, what is going on? And then there was a public meeting that the Ward One City Council organized, and Eversource was there and was going to give a presentation about why their rates are what they are and give a breakdown of everybody's bills. And then they were supposed to do a Q&A after. And I guess 15 minutes before the meeting, they told the city councilor, no, we're not going to do a Q&A after. What we're going to do is we're going to break up into small like individuals and go out into the lobby and people can come up to us and talk to us individually about their bills, which is, dividing and conquering. You don't want to face the firing squad, a room full of angry residents who have legitimate questions to ask you about what's going on. They didn't come here to talk to you about their bill. They can call and do that over the phone. Um, and so the leader of that group was there and he took the opportunity to get up and get on a soapbox and tear them apart. And I completely agreed, but I say all this to say that at the end, I went over to him and I introduced myself and I explained who I was. And I had gotten up and debunked a few things because they were talking about we need more gas infrastructure. This is because of those environmentalists that stopped the project 10 years ago, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I was like, this has nothing to do with 10 years ago. If those pipelines had something to do with this, you would have seen these rates 10 years ago, not now. So one thing has nothing to do with the other. I debunked it a few other ways. I'm not going to waste everybody's time on that. But um, my point is I approached him to try to find common ground, introduce myself, explain that I am a member of this community, have been for a long time, helped lead campaigns that were successful, and wanted to work with each other and find common ground and understand the truth, not narratives, not rhetoric that is fueling the wrong things. And he was barely interested in anything I had to say and was way more interested in talking to the Eversource rep sitting next to him. Does that not put up red flags to anybody? He wants to talk to the Eversource rep, not me, not another community member who's concerned about the rates. And
So
in
Wendy, you always follow the money. I
I
know
know.
what you're talking about, right?
Yep,
So you know what's behind that. And it's they greenwashed the title, right?
yep.
Everybody was so mad at Eversource, so it's a very catchy title. But
Hmm.
we kind of know where it's coming from, but they do 34,000 people. And
Yep,
all we can do is write letters and respond to that
yep,
as we
yep.
can.
I mean, so I just shared that to say I literally approached the person who was spearheading that campaign, and he wanted nothing to do. He barely heard a word I said, and he has not since reached out to me or talked to me at all. So there are people who have agendas that there's no amount of approaching and trying to find common ground and talk to get on the right, to share the right information. There's just no hope. I tried it, and after I walked away and I reflected back on it, I was like, I mean, I tried because that's who I am, but that was fruitless from the start, and I was kind of stupid for thinking that there was a chance. But
Yeah, I've been really frustrated by that whole conversation because yeah, the rates are out of control. It's
yep,
it's insane.
yep,
But then one thing that the Healy administration immediately did was they reduced funding to Mass Save to make people happy. But like Mass Save, we have to be transitioning away from all of the natural gas in our homes, and mass save is a big way that we do that, like in order
Right.
to meet our goals as a state. And that's like such a teeny tiny drop in the bucket. That is not what's making our rates go up. And then last week, finally, the DPU issued this amazing ruling that, they cannot use ratepayer money to extend gas lines. Like they have to prioritize using it to fix the leaks,
Yep.
and that they have to be shifting to climate smart technology,
Mhm.
and that they're going to push the utilities to do so. Like these Eversource executives have huge profits. Like let's look at that. That is they're deflecting from the real problem.
Yep.
And yeah, I have so many
I do
concerns,
I
but
do think that having had a 10-year experience with Eversource and that campaign and watching their resistance to mass save and being unwilling participants in something that they were required to be part of, and then watching them promote it on the radio and TV as if they spearheaded that, knowing full well that they hated it from the start. So they're trying to use it as a marketing thing. I'm like, what? I do believe so. When they got up and spoke in front of everybody, they made the biggest piece of the pie in your bill mass saves. And so what I think, and this can be the conspiracy theorist to me. I don't care. Most of the times I'm actually right, and something comes to fruition, and I'm like, see, you people thought I was crazy, but I wasn't. I do believe that the Mass Save program needs to be audited because I don't trust that Eversource is taking all that money and putting it into what Mass Save is supposed to be spending it on. I believe that they are calling like you have you guys heard of the
Excuse me,
reliability projects?
Wendy, can I just make one comment?
Yeah.
This is getting to be a very
Sorry.
geography specific issue. It's
Yes.
fascinating. But just before, because we're kind of running
Yes.
on short on time,
Yep.
there may be some other questions from
Yes.
other people. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, no, I
it's
didn't mean to monopolize. Sorry. Go
okay,
ahead.
but thank you.
Yep.
Um, uh, uh, have you been looking at the chat? Uh, Anybody else have any questions?
so Harvey had some questions about AI and just how we talk about it with people, and how we get people to think more critically about their own AI use. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, Mariah, and advice for people.
Yeah, because I'm also concerned about the amount of power that AI uses. Um, I think AI can be a really wonderful tool. Um, I do use it sometimes in my photography, and I meant to mention this also when I was giving out tips on identifying AI, is that sometimes like Instagram or Facebook or other social medias will flare things as AI, but uh, sometimes that's because like the way that I use it, for example, I don't want to go around and individually mask things and go around and individually remove every single little distraction or uh, have to go around the outline of a very I don't know how to explain it, but a very complicated kind of outline and make sure that my mask lines up perfectly so that it looks right. So you can't necessarily use that as a tool to say, yes, this image is completely fake. But my point is that I think it's great for using things um, when you're using it for things like that, because it's something that's very tedious. And, I would have to look more into this, but, I wonder about the amount of power usage that I would use if I did have to go around and um, do that manually. That would take me something that could take me an hour on my computer. Is that more or less power than it would be using for me to click a button and have it done for me? And then obviously that frees up my time to do more valuable work. I think in general, even taking out kind of the climate aspect of it, um, it's great when it's doing these kinds of meaningless, mindless tasks that take up a lot of our time and energy. But in general, I don't want it thinking for me. I don't want it making decisions for me. And honestly, it's not particularly good at doing those things. I mean, I I look at like the AI results from Google, and half of the time they're wrong. So I think uh, on one hand, AI is good. On the other hand, it's not nearly as good as people think it is. So, yeah, if you're using it as a tool, then I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it if you're doing it responsibly. But it is concerning that some people let it think for them and make decisions for them.
Yeah, and if you are going to use AI, fact checking anything that AI gives you is absolutely critical. And you know, that's something that I think the average user does not know and should. So
Yeah, I think it's very rare. Even like I said, when I use it to do things in photos, again, great shortcut, but 99.9% of the time I have to go back and do some editing manually. And I think the same goes for, writing or research, especially research. It's not good with research. It's bad. So yeah, you can't let a AI think for you.
there was some other discussion in the chat about whether media literacy is required. And, as a librarian, I just want to say, like, it is very scattershot across the country, whether or not librarians are required in schools, whether or not media literacy is required. And so that is something that I think is really important to advocate for wherever you live. For example, I live in a town that has zero school librarians, and I work in a town two towns over. And I have been advocating for years that Fairhaven, Massachusetts needs school librarians. Unfortunately, have very, very low funding for schools. We just had town meeting last week, and it was just embarrassing that we were fighting about an elevator repair and replacement, and that was horrifying to me. I mean, we're talking like willing to not be ADA compliant. So librarians are a lot of people think a nice to have. I think it's necessary, and I think that this country in general needs to take a good hard look at what is required in order to have educated citizens. And I think that failure of not adequately educating citizens has kind of gotten us in the mess that we're in right now. And I think that we have a lot of work to do to improve as a country. So, media literacy is one huge important piece of that. I think that the work that school librarians do in teaching these kinds of skills is really, really, really important. And unfortunately, not every school has a school librarian, and not every school that even has a school librarian has the time or effort to dedicate to this, but that could be changed. These are all things that could be changed with the right legislation. There is actually a bill in the state house right now that would require a school librarian in every school in Massachusetts. And I can send out that bill number when I send out everything else, because that's something that's very important to me and my colleagues as well, to make those kinds of changes. So yeah, but I love
And
talking to
just
adults about this too.
Well, and just one thing to add to it, I love media literacy and media theory. And the big thing that I always mention is that we spend a lot of time on screens, on social media. Everywhere we go, we're inundated with images. We're seeing movies, we're on our phones, we're getting advertised to constantly, even when we're not in front of a screen. There's print advertisements and billboards and everything. And like I said, literally every single image we see has a message. And we need to know how to interpret those messages and understand what it is that we're seeing, because we absorb those messages whether we realize it or not. Um, I think it's just as important to be able to be media literate as it is to be like book literate. It's very, very important. especially with kids. I mean, I remember growing up in um, like the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, and the amount of like eating disorders and body images issues that young girls had because they just didn't even realize that all of those models were being photoshopped or, you know, things like that. It's very important and has a real impact on our lives. So anytime you can advocate for media literacy, I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
Well, I just want to, we're running out of time. Just want to thank Laura and Mariah. Very informative, and it's raised everybody's consciousness. And one of the takeaways is that we can spread this word. It's necessary. So thank you very much. Um, and again, this has been recorded, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody will receive links and whatnot, and all that wonderful reference material. I'm going to just dig into it. I think it's going to be fascinating. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us. Please spread the word. And we need to just keep working at it. That's just the way it is. Oh, all right. Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye now.